my name's Chris Webb and I work for the Power BI team at Microsoft. In this session, I'll be joined by my colleague Christian Wade, and together we'll take a look at the vision and roadmap for Power BI. Now, the problem we're trying to solve at Microsoft is the same problem that BI vendors have been trying to solve for the last 20 or 30 years. And that is, how do we get people to make decisions based on data rather than gut feeling? Now, this is not purely a technical problem. Obviously, there is a technical aspect, and a bit later in this session, my colleague Christian is going to show you some great new features in Power BI that will help you solve that problem. But at Microsoft, we think that the real key to making people change the way they make their decisions is to create what we call a data culture. A data culture is an environment where everybody just automatically makes decisions based on real evidence. Now, this is a big change, and obviously at the moment, everything's up in the air, and it's quite difficult to make changes inside organizations. You know, lots of people are working from home, everybody's under a lot of stress and economic pressure. You can't just go down the hall and talk to your colleagues anymore. But at the same time, I think now that we're in a period of great change, this is a great opportunity to change the way we work, to move away from old habits. So let's see how Power BI can help you foster a data culture inside your organization, from the individual to the group to the whole organization. Let's start with the individual. Here's an interesting fact for you. Based on our research, only 30% of people inside an organization have got access to a BI tool. What does this actually mean? Well, like I said, if we're going to be creating a data culture, a culture where everybody in the organization is empowered to make decisions based on data, they need access to that data. They need access to a tool that's going to be able to help them make those decisions. Now, let's consider why only 30% of users have got access to a BI tool. Well, one reason is possibly cost. Historically, BI tools have been very expensive. One of the breakthroughs that Power BI has made is that rather than looking at $1,000, $2,000 per seat for a user to be able to get access to a BI tool, we're talking about a fraction of that. Almost a hundredth of what the cost is of previous BI tools. And it's that economic change, that ability to be able to afford BI tools for all of the users, that means for the first time, it is actually possible to put a dedicated BI tool on everybody's desktop. And that, I think, is perhaps the major way that Power BI has changed the industry. It suddenly put BI tools within the reach of absolutely everybody. Now, having Power BI on everybody's desktop is one thing. We have to make sure that people actually use it, that people actually want to use it, that people fall in love with their data. So there's another thing that we're doing with Power BI, and that is focusing on ease of use. Now, what tools does everybody know how to use? Well, Office is a great example. Everybody pretty much has Office on their desktop. Everybody knows how to use Office. It's a very familiar tool. My kids, when they were at school, when they were 8 or 9, they were learning how to use Microsoft Office. It's a fundamental skill that everybody has. Now, in order to make Power BI as easy to use as possible, to make it, sometimes we use the phrase PowerPoint for data, what we've deliberately done is made Power BI look and feel as much like an Office product as possible. Now, that just isn't a branding thing. That's important from a usability point of view, because we feel that if somebody knows how to use Excel or PowerPoint, they know how to use Power BI. It's a familiar interface. Another thing we're doing to try and make everybody successful with Power BI is to create great AI-infused experiences. It's one thing to be able to build a report, it's another thing to be able to get some useful insights from your data. And of course, not everybody is a data scientist, not everybody is a statistician. So what we're working on with Power BI, and we've already got lots of evidence of this with the key influences visual and the decision tree visual, is to use AI to make it easy for people to make decisions, to find trends and insights that they wouldn't have found otherwise. This doesn't mean that we're going to force everybody to try and learn how to train a machine learning model, far from it, because we know that that's really not going to be feasible. Instead, what we're doing is we're making visuals like the key influences visual, where it's super easy for people to pass data into the key influences visual and for it to find insights for you, to make a number of different suggestions about things that you might want to look at. And by doing that, we want to make everybody feel empowered to be able to do types of analysis that they would never have been able to do before. As well as the individual, we also need to have a look at the needs of the organization. And again, there are a number of different aspects that we need to consider when we look at how Power BI can meet the needs of even the largest, most demanding organizations. First of all, we need to look at how Power BI is able to scale. One of the great things about Power BI as a cloud-based service is that scaling up to meet the needs of your organization is easier than ever before. You don't have to buy hardware, you don't have to configure complex software. You can click a button and Power BI is able to meet your needs. And that means that Power BI is able to scale up to meet not just the needs of 1 or 2 users or a department of 10 users, but the whole organization, where in some cases there are hundreds of thousands of users. That also means that Power BI needs to scale up to be able to handle the data volumes that organizations need. And with Power BI Premium, we can now scale up to meet the needs of the most demanding organizations, the organizations with really large data volumes. Our work with composite models in Power BI, especially sitting on top of Azure Synapse Analytics, means that we can work with not only millions of rows of data, but billions and tens of billions of rows of data. There's also the aspect of governance. Now, just to digress a little bit, in the world of BI, we've always had a bit of a tension between self-service BI and corporate BI. On the previous slide, essentially what I showed you was how Power BI is becoming a really great self-service BI tool. But self-service BI on its own can lead to lots of problems. I think everybody who's had experience of doing BI with other self-service tools will know that if you just let users do whatever they want, you end up in a very confused situation where nobody really knows who's got the most up-to-date data. Nobody really knows whose version of a calculation is correct. Nobody's able to compare 2 reports and really understand which one's correct. And so you end up in a state where nobody trusts the data, where nobody's able to make reliable decisions, because nobody really knows who's done the right thing. And that means that some central governance is called for. Now, this idea of centralized BI isn't new. It's been around for as long, if not longer, than self-service BI. And historically, IT departments have tried to solve this problem by saying, okay, we're going to own all of the data, we're going to build a data warehouse, it will have absolutely everything you need in it, and we're also going to build the reports on top of it, so that we know that the reports follow the corporate branding, We know that these reports have the calculations designed in a way that's consistent and error-free, and we're going to build a system that is properly maintainable, that isn't going to crash when somebody goes on vacation. But of course, corporate BI has had as many problems as self-service BI. We all know, if you've worked on a corporate BI project, that corporate BI is incredibly expensive. It's also very, very inflexible. It takes a long time to build up a corporate BI solution, and quite often by the time it's ready, the business has moved on, and what was needed 1 or 2 years ago is no longer needed today. And what's more, there's this disconnect, I think, when you have the business needing reports and the IT department being the only people who can build them. Because when the business decides it needs to do a particular type of analysis, if it has to go to somebody in IT who says, well, yes, I can do it, but it's going to be a couple of weeks before I can get round to it, that causes an awful lot of frustration. And it means that businesses tend to just go away and make decisions on their own, or try and use their own self-service BI tools. And the corporate BI tool becomes hated and irrelevant. So what we want to do is again try to solve those problems with Power BI and create a modern enterprise BI tool. One where it's possible to have centralized governance and have the benefits that corporate BI was aiming for, but at the same time have all of the flexibility and power of a self-service BI tool. And once we've squared that particular circle, once we've got the best of self-service and corporate BI, and of course we've got everybody building reports using the same tool, not just the business using one tool and the IT department using another. When everybody's working with one tool, as we want them to do with Power BI, then we'll find that everybody's on the same page. All reports are going to be consistent. Everybody is able to share their insights appropriately. And once we've got to that point and we've got that modern enterprise BI solution, we find that organizations can really finally make that transition to a data culture where individual employees are empowered to make decisions, but they do so within a governed framework where they can be sure that they're using the most up-to-date data, they can be sure that they're using the correct calculations, and that when somebody else does some similar analysis and builds a report, those two reports will actually be genuinely comparable. Let's just take a look at some of the features that have been added to Power BI or will be added to Power BI in the future that make that modern enterprise BI platform possible. For example, we've got some great features that have been added to Power BI recently for looking at data lineage and impact analysis. We've been doing a lot of work on data flows. Data flows are a way of, not replacing a data warehouse, but having some of the benefits of a data warehouse for self-service users. So they're no longer repeatedly getting data from the same data sources over and over. They can make an extract once and share that between multiple data sets. We've got some great features for creating enterprise-grade semantic models. No longer is a Power BI dataset just a small chunk of data that can be used at a departmental level. Power BI datasets can now grow up and replace your Azure Analysis Services models and serve vast numbers of users. And in fact, they're going to take an even greater step in the future with the composite model that Christian's going to show you in a moment. And we've also got more options for enterprise reporting. Not only have we got the great Power BI reports that everybody knows and loves, but in Power BI Premium, we have paginated reports, which are pixel perfect, great for printing, great for emailing out to large numbers of people. And something we've got and something that's going to be, again, improved in the future is our Excel integration story as well. because again, a lot of the types of reports that people want to build, some of them will work well in Power BI, some of them will work well in paginated reports, but some of them, to be honest, will work best in Excel. You can't take people away from Excel. So our Excel integration just means that we're able to keep that traditional cottage industry of people who build reports in Excel inside the enterprise BI umbrella, rather than having them go away and just work with extracting data and building their own kind of reports that again don't kind of match up with everybody else's. But as well as looking at individual features, it's also really interesting to look at some of the wider themes that we're going to be pursuing in the future. And there are 4 that we've got here. First of all, we want decisions to be made everywhere inside the organization. When people make business decisions, they aren't always inside their BI tool. So we want Power BI to be integrated with all of the other tools that people use. We want Power BI to be available where the decisions are made. First of all, we understand that BI is an incredibly collaborative process. And that's why we've been investing heavily in integration of Power BI and Microsoft Teams. So that when people are discussing data, when people are discussing decisions, they've got their Power BI reports immediately available. Another similar thing to consider is that once you've made a decision, you want to take some action based on it. So as a result, something we've been investing in the past and we're going to be investing in a lot in future is integration between Power BI and the rest of the Power Platform. We've already got a Power Apps visual. We also, in the future, will be having integration between Power BI and Power Automate, so that when you see something happening in your data, for example, you see that you're out of stock of a particular item, you don't have to move to a different tool. You can access a Power App, kick off a Power Automate flow, and be able to trigger the reorder process directly from inside Power BI. Another thing to think about is integration between Power BI and the wider data stack. Power BI plays well with just about every single data source you could possibly want to work with, both inside and outside Microsoft. But we also know that there are going to be some advantages for special integration between Power BI and certain Azure products and services, most notably Synapse Analytics. And we've got some really interesting functionality coming up to show the benefits of this greater integration between Power BI and Synapse in the future. And then finally, there's the theme of trust. As I've said several times already before, nobody is going to be able to make decisions confidently. You won't have a data culture unless everybody trusts the data. And trust is also about security. You can't make data available to people unless you're sure they're going to be able to use it securely. The data that you see in Power BI is often the most valuable data inside an organization. And that's quite often why gatekeepers refuse to share it widely. One thing that we've been working on is integration with the information security features inside Office. So, you might have been familiar if you've opened up an Excel spreadsheet that you're unable to open up that Excel spreadsheet if it contains sensitive data outside your organization. And we've extended that to Power BI, which means that now somebody can look at a Power BI report, export some data to Excel. They'll be able to use that data so long as they're on a corporate laptop, but as soon as they email it to a competitor or to themselves to try and open up at home, they won't be able to get access to that data. So the security of the data is not only there inside Power BI, it's also enforced as soon as the data leaves Power BI as well, which we think is an incredibly compelling story. Okay, let me now hand over to my colleague Christian Wade, and he's going to show you some really cool demos that actually bring to life everything that I've been talking about so far.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Hello everybody, I'm Christian Wade and welcome to my home. I'm going to drill into the next level of detail for the capabilities that Chris was talking about, and we'll start off with deep integration with Azure and the Azure data stack. We in Power BI, we're very fortunate to be built on the world's leading cloud, which means that from the customer's perspective, we are tightly integrated with the Azure data stack. You don't need to copy data across clouds. You don't need to have these silos of data across all of these different platforms that are very difficult to integrate. And a prime example of that is our integration with Azure Synapse Analytics. So Synapse is the evolution of SQL Data Warehouse, and it brings together the data warehouse, the data lake, ETL with Azure Data Factory, machine learning, all through a single pane of glass being Azure Synapse Analytics Studio. And of course, you can associate a Power BI workspace with a Synapse workspace so that you can author, manage, and deploy Power BI reports right there from within the Synapse environment. Now, something that we're building is the automatic performance optimization based on query usage patterns. So you may be aware that Power BI datasets can cache data into memory using the in-memory VertiPack engine, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the fastest BI engine on the planet by far. But to replicate the data into memory, there may be some management overhead and there may be some additional cost if we're dealing with massive data sets in a Synapse data warehouse, which may be tens of billions of rows and tens of terabytes of data. So you can, of course, run the Power BI dataset in direct query mode, so it doesn't replicate the data into memory. And as users interact with visuals in Power BI, SQL queries will be submitted on the fly to the Synapse Data Warehouse, but then to enhance performance automatically, this feature will create and maintain materialized views based on usage patterns. This then becomes a self-learning, self-optimizing system, very easy to set up. You just flip a switch and it'll go to work. And another point is that this works really well for near real-time requirements because materialized views in Synapse are automatically kept in sync with the base table. So there is no synchronization considerations. Now let's talk about bring your own log analytics. Azure Log Analytics is a monitoring service in Azure, and all of the major Azure services subscribe to Azure Log Analytics, including Synapse actually. So you can associate a Log Analytics workspace with a Power BI workspace, and Power BI will then submit fine-grained telemetry logging data to Log Analytics, so you can easily figure out who's using the system, which users are placing a strain on the system, what's the overall health of the system. You can use it for auditing, and you can query Log Analytics so you can extract that data, put it in Power BI reports, etc. And since, as I said, Synapse also integrates with Log Analytics, you can actually trace user interactions in Power BI through to the DAX query on the dataset, through to the SQL query on the Synapse SQL pool to then figure out whether materialized views are being hit or not, for example. And Log Analytics will be shipping in the near future. Now let's talk about Lineage and impact analysis. We've recently launched the Lineage view in the Power BI service, which gives customers an end-to-end 360-degree view from data source all the way through to dashboard and everything in between. We see this a lot with customers who may be looking at a visual in a Power BI dashboard and want to know, where's this data coming from? Is it coming from trusted sources? Well, with the Lineage view, you can see exactly which reports it's coming from, which data sets, which could reside in a different workspace, data flows, data sources, etc. You have complete end-to-end visibility. The Lineage view also supports impact analysis. Should you want to deploy a new version of an artifact, for example, a new data set, you can see exactly who all of the downstream consumers of that data set are. Who are the beneficiaries of the deployment? Because there could be hundreds of reports in different workspaces all consuming from the same data set as a corporate semantic model. And now let's talk about trust. So we are quite fortunate that we can leverage the Microsoft Information Protection capability in Power BI that's already built for things like Office artifacts. So this allows you to tag Power BI artifacts with sensitivity labels. They're actually the same labels that you see in Microsoft Office documents, which you may think, oh, this just means that I need to encrypt an attachment if it's tagged as highly confidential. But actually, there are many governance rules that are defined in Microsoft Cloud App Security that govern these artifacts. For example, whether you can download data to an unmanaged device, whether you can access data from an unsanctioned region, and all sorts of other governance rules and anomaly detection that is provided by Microsoft Cloud App Security. So we recently launched deployment pipelines, which makes it very easy for customers to get up and running in next to no time to set up application lifecycle management for these mission critical systems, potentially with hundreds and thousands of users that require user acceptance testing and deployments across environments. It's a very visual guided experience. You get this diff analysis of all of the artifacts between each environment. You can selectively deploy only the artifacts that you want to deploy, which means you can be very responsive to your users' needs. There may be many things in your development environment that are not ready to deploy, and it's very easy to get up and running. Now, Power BI datasets, as I'm going to discuss in a moment, are backwards compatible with traditional application lifecycle management capabilities like integration with DevOps. We at Microsoft have a deep heritage in enterprise BI. Power BI datasets are actually run on the Analysis Services engine, and Analysis Services has been a market dominator for multiple decades. So all we had to do was open up direct access to the Analysis Services engine running behind the Power BI dataset, and that by definition allows every other major BI vendor on the planet to connect to the Power BI dataset as though it were an Analysis Services model. So what does this mean? I mean, many of these vendors actually built their businesses back in the day as client tools to Analysis Services because of the heritage that we have in this space. So that means it's not just about connectivity. Many of these tools support the Live Connect model where users can create reports without having to copy all of the data locally. So for customers, this means you can roll out single version of the truth semantic models at a global scale, even if certain pockets of users may not yet be using Power BI for data visualization. We're confident that over time those users will gravitate to Power BI anyway, so it's not a problem. Now, the XML endpoint is not just used for data visualization tools. It's also used for data management tools and traditional data modeling tools like SQL Server data tools that runs in Visual Studio. So by definition, integrates with source control and Azure DevOps for automated build and deployment and CI/CD and those traditional application lifecycle management processes that we were talking about earlier. So as you can see here, we are deploying a tabular model from SSDT straight up to a Power BI workspace. It then becomes a Power BI dataset, pretty much like any other. Now, something that I am extremely excited about is that we recently launched the External Tools ribbon. We're very grateful to Daniel Ottikia for having built the External Tools ribbon as part of the Power BI contributor program. He's also the author of the fantastic tabular editor semantic modeling tool. So this is just a win-win for everyone, right? Because as I said, Power BI datasets are literally run on the Analysis Services engine. So there is an Analysis Services instance running right here behind Power BI Desktop, just like there is in the Power BI service. So we've had all of this semantic modeling goodness that has been built up over decades, and it's all been locked away in the Analysis Services engine, whereas the External Tools ribbon and Tabular Editor allow you to access that semantic modeling goodness, to get to features like calculation groups, to address measure proliferation and allow DAX calculations to be reused across hundreds of measures in a semantic model. Perspectives and metadata translations to support users in different countries to automatically view reports using their native language. So this is just a fantastic feature. We're super excited about it. The usage is literally going through the roof right now. So we're very happy that we've enabled this extensibility model on top of Power BI Desktop. And now I'm going to talk about composite models where I'm going to actually run a demo. So as Chris was talking about, traditionally there has even been some friction between kind of corporate BI and self-service BI. You know, the IT owned corporate BI was very rigid and very inflexible, and if a business user needed some new data added to the data warehouse, it could take a long time, and there was no way of mashing up that data with local data, right? So the composite models feature is for the analyst consuming data from these enterprise semantic models, and this allows them to mash up data with their own local data. They don't need to wait 2 or 3 months for that data set to be built into the data warehouse. And in many cases, it doesn't even make sense to integrate that data into the data warehouse because it may only be relevant to a small handful of users. So they can mash up the data with their own local data as well as across multiple semantic models that may be spread out across different business units. So let me just go ahead and show you. So I'm here in Power BI Desktop and it's a blank canvas right now. I'm going to click on Power BI Datasets and I'm presented with a list of all the datasets that I have access to in the service. There could literally be hundreds, if not thousands of datasets listed here. So we've made it super easy to find what you're looking for because the datasets sanctioned as the single version of the truth for the organization are listed right at the top with an endorsement level of certified or promoted. I'll select the sales model, which is a semantic model with 3 billion rows. There's no way I could copy all this data locally. And I'll create this beautiful report in seconds. So far there is nothing out of the ordinary. This happens every day. This is just another day at the office. Users connect to large corporate semantic models in Power BI and create beautiful reports in seconds all the time. I'm going to click on the model view and I can see the remote tables, columns and relationships. Again, I'm not copying any data locally. And what gets really interesting here is that the Live Connect button is still enabled. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select the finance model, which is a different semantic model from the finance group. It has the single version of the truth finance metrics, which I happen to want to see side by side with my sales metrics. So I've got some extra tables here in the field list and I'm going to zoom out and lo and behold, I've got 2 corporate semantic models and this is now a composite model. And what if I want to combine data from the 2? Easy. I can just create relationships between them. So let's create one for date. I simply click and drag and drop and create a relationship for date ID. We'll do the same for customer. And now back in the report, let's create the margin measure that combines data from the sales measure in the sales model and royalty and volume discount from the finance model. I can absolutely do that. That's not a problem. So I've got my new measure. Let's quickly make it a percentage and then we will drag it onto the visual. So just like that, I've created this measure that combines data from 2 remote corporate semantic models. It's not copying any data locally. I'm not managing any data loads. I'm not causing data fragmentation or silos of data. This is a really liberating experience for the analyst, giving this kind of flexibility that the analyst has never had before. So I'm going to go back to the modeling view. So you may ask, is this just for 2 corporate semantic models? And the answer is no. The whole get data menu system is still enabled. I can do whatever I want in here. So let's go ahead and select, say, some weather data, which I happen to have in Excel. And the data warehouse team told me it would take too long to integrate this into the data warehouse. Well, I don't need to wait for them because I can do it myself. So I want to see if weather is impacting sales. So I've got this weather data table has just shown up here. And again, I'm going to quickly create some relationships. We'll go with zip code and of course date. With that, I can come back to the report. I've got my weather data table down here and I'm going to drag temperature onto the visual and we'll make it an average. And now I've combined it with my local data as well. This is a completely transformed workflow compared to what analysts were used to previously. And I can even come in and I can decorate the metadata of this model however I see fit. I can, for example, create a user hierarchy Going from country to county to city to zip code. Go ahead and apply the changes. So I can create this additional semantic logic on this composite model for the consumers only of this model. So this is so much more flexible than anything the analyst has ever had before. And this is also fantastic news for the business intelligence professional who creates these corporate semantic models, because the value that the BI Pro adds to the organization has just gone through the roof, and there is now no excuse for not using the single version of the truth semantic model. Users can no longer say, well, I had to copy all the data locally in order to mash it up with my own local data and create all this data fragmentation. That doesn't fly anymore. This will really streamline the relationship and the workflow between the business and IT. So that's it for this year. Thank you very much for joining us from both Chris and myself. We very much hope we get to see you in person at SQL Bits in 2021, by which time we'll have some amazing new Power BI features to show you. Thank you.